Welcome back to the Complicated Kids podcast. I'm your host, Gabrielle Nicolay, and today we've got Claire Lerner back. Thank you, Claire.
Always happy to be here.
And we are going to talk about something. I pinged you. I saw something on social media, and I pinged you and I said, we got to hit record on this thing. So to introduce yourself a little bit for folks who don't know you, and then we'll jump into our topic today.
Okay, great. So thanks for having me back. So I'm a child development specialist, a clinical social worker by degree, and I've been in the field over 35 years doing a range of things, all early childhood. And you can go on my website and look at my resume. I don't want to bore anybody with all of that, but right now where I spend my time is largely in the trenches with families who come to me with the range of issues that arise in the early years, that they're flummoxed by or concerned about, and they want more insight and more tools to what I think of as thread this seemingly elusive needle of, being that supportive, loving, high warmth, validating parent, where all feelings are welcome, and kids' social emotional development is really valued, while also being a really good, strong limit setter to help kids learn to accept boundaries, accept limits, and learn to adapt to the real world. I also do a lot of preschool consultation where I'm in preschools supporting teachers and parents and families through observing kids in group environments and trying to figure out what the root causes of the challenges they're having and how to best support them.
You're a really good person for people to have on their team. It's a really you have an eye for seeing what's happening. And one of the things that you see with this eye is the thing that I saw on social media, which you call an emotional support parent. So tell us what that is and how it works.
Okay, so in my practice over the years, what has evolved is that I would say the lion's share of families who come to me have a child who I think of as highly sensitive by nature. And so these are kids who are wired to register their feelings and experiences and sensations in the world at a higher decibel. I think of these kids as sort of not having a thick filter that protects them from, getting distracted by loud sounds or changes in their environment or transitions or other people's feelings and reactions to them. They register these experiences at a deep level and therefore have big reactions. Right. So, one kid runs into a play center and they see a huge pile of Magna-Tiles and they're like, amazing Magna-Tiles, and they're off to the races without looking back. And then you've got a kid who goes into a situation like that that's new, and they're processors. Everything, like they register things like, what is this place and who are these people and are they going to be kind to me and am I going to know what to do and am I going to be able to be good at what I'm supposed to do? And they therefore often are slower to warm up, need more time to acclimate to things. Often they get triggered into discomfort more quickly, right? Because they're absorbing so much, often much more than their systems can really tolerate. And so they tend to have more meltdowns. They're also amazing. These are kids who are incredibly empathetic and charismatic and have amazing ideas and are super tuned into other people's thoughts and feelings. And they're very creative and they're amazing. And they also tend to get overloaded more quickly because of their systems. And so because I'm talking day in and day out with families who are struggling with kids, right, who have a really hard time with transitions, who have a hard time managing when they can't get what they want when they want it, everything feels immediate, right? Or you've, cut their peanut butter and jelly sandwich on the wrong diagonal and they're insisting that you make them a completely new sandwich because their brain had a very strong feeling that this is what they needed and wanted, and you have defied that, right? So this is the reality of many of the families I see.
The blue
So
cup, not the green cup.
exactly. In fact, one of my earliest articles that went viral was literally called in all caps, I said I want the red cup. So it's funny that you say that, because that is what happens, is that they have these seemingly irrational reactions that are maddening to parents because it seems so illogical. Like, it's the same juice or water. Why does it matter if the cup is blue or green or purple? But to these kids, because I think they feel often out of control on the inside, they can become very controlling on the outside, right?
Okay, pause. Because where you have just taken us, this is like the primrose path of a choice point, of a decision that gets made, sometimes unconsciously, sometimes very consciously, by parents, of when your kid says the peanut butter sandwich is not cut properly, or when your kid says, I needed the red cup, you then, the adult, have a really interesting choice to make. And there actually are not only two choices, there are many different ways to respond to this. And most parents, and I see them too, because these guys that you're describing, these highly sensitive, we call them orchids over here, right? They have at one point or another the parents have reached for many of these different responses to this particular problem. So we try negotiating, and we try just having them tolerate it. You get what you get and you don't get upset. And we try giving in, and we try all the things. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yes. And you try reasoning, like, oh my gosh, it's the same water. Why does it matter? So, and this is, of course, these are all amazing parents. Let me just say that. I'm a recovering ESP, which we'll get to in a minute. I know we're sort of getting ahead of ourselves, but I think it's important to kind of establish this, that the emotional support parent evolves often in families where they have a highly sensitive kid who's a big reactor. And because of that, there often is one parent, either a single parent or one parent in a couple, who develops a relationship with the child where they're extremely close and they're extremely tuned into each other, and it's beautiful in many ways. And this parent also ends up sort of being a buffer for the child, because the upsets can be big and they can be multiple times a day. And so these parents, as like a coping mechanism for the parent in a way, they are often running to the rescue and trying to mollify or get the child to calm in order for there to be peace in the family, because this can be very disruptive. Again, I'm not denigrating these kids or these families. This is just a fact in these families, that when you've got a big reactor who's having major meltdowns over seemingly minor things many times a day, it is extremely stressful. And so it evolves that one parent who's super tuned into the child and anticipates what a challenge might be for them and is often heading it off, right? And what happened one day as I was working with these families, and to your question, Gabrielle, like helping them figure out how to be empathetic to the fact that this is very distressing to them, that they got the blue cup instead of the red cup, and still help them manage that upset in order to help them become more adaptable, right? Which is the ultimate goal. As I'm working with families, helping them find this balance, I talked to a mom maybe about 6 or 8 months ago who said to me, I am my child's emotional support animal. And I mean, it took my breath away. It still does. I got super choked up because I am that parent. I was that parent. I've worked very hard over many years to find this balance that I'm talking about. Like, how is it that you are that supportive parent, that your child knows you are their person, without enabling them. And that's what really crystallized for me in that moment, is she, in that just phraseology, it completely captured what I and hundreds of my families experience every day, right? That your child can't make it unless you are there and you are anticipating and you are providing this buffer. And so I call it now instead the emotional support parent, just because it became too confusing.
Yeah.
But I want to give this mom credit, of course, without, naming her for confidentiality reasons, but it began to really help me help other parents, often a mom, really understand that they're not alone, and you're not a helicopter parent. That was really what one of the points I wanted to make when I wrote this article recently, is that these moms are already under tremendous stress. Again, these are amazing kids, and life is also more stressful and harder. People don't want to say it. It's just true. And it's not fair to these parents not to acknowledge that. It is not like they're at the playground and one parent is saying, "Come on, Gabrielle, it's time to leave." And they're like, "No problem, mommy." And they get up and they come. And they make that parent look so good.
Yep.
And then you've got the kid where they're running away from you, they're melting down, it hasn't been enough time. You're dealing with this 10 times a day.
Yep.
Because transitions are hard. And no matter how much amazing anticipation you do, and warning, and collaborating with them and doing joint problem solving, at the end of the day, and you're sharing your calm, they still will melt down because it just feels really hard and really uncomfortable. And these parents need that acknowledgement. And they're not helicopter parents. They're surviving and trying to figure out how to create a peaceful family in the context of having a big reactor.
This is something I tell parents all the time. I'm like, you did not cause this. The fact that you're even coming to me asking me a question means you're thinking about this and trying to figure out, you're trying to problem solve this because you recognize that something's not working, but you didn't make this happen. Now, that's not the same as saying, okay, there are some things going forward that maybe we want to do differently. There are some things that we want to look ahead to and understand, kind of, okay, we want to get from, I've been using this metaphor a lot recently, but we want to get from New York to California. We want to drive there. Okay, how are we going to go? We can like do an up down and go to Ohio and go to Florida and Louisiana and all of that, or we can go straight across. And so sort of keeping those things in mind too, but 100%, like, this is real. These kids are hard. Parents are stressed. Parents are bringing their own childhood trauma to the party, by the way. So there's that happening.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
Okay. So we've defined this problem, whatever, phenomenon. Some parents are their kids' person, and they should be, because they're doing a damn good job of it. And that kid would be falling apart, but for this parent, this emotional support parent. How do you help families go from, I have to manage every little thing, to, okay, I've got a strategy, I've got a plan, I feel like I'm in charge now?
So I'm going to answer that by telling you a story of a recent family I'm still working with. So there are two moms with a very, very feisty 4-year-old, amazing kid, right? Full of vim and vigor, amazing thinker, just incredibly creative, incredibly bright and clever, and also highly sensitive, big reactor. And therefore, they're dealing with a lot of meltdowns when things don't happen the way they expect, the way they want. There's a lot of other challenges sometimes these kids have that we're not even mentioning, just like being slower to warm up and acclimate to new situations, being more self-conscious, right? These are often the kids who don't want other people watching them. They feel evaluated. They sometimes misinterpret other people's intentions and personalize it. There's like a whole host of traits that often these kids have,
Mhm.
that again lead to parents sort of wanting to head off, right, some of these issues. So I've got these two moms, and I'm telling this story because of your mentioning about parents' own trauma. Okay. So what they were explaining to me is that one of the moms, I'll call her Chrissy, is the emotional support parent, and the other mom, Lucy, is not. And part of that is because Lucy is a much more boundaried person by nature.
Mhm,
She's much more comfortable with limits,
mhm.
and she's not triggered into discomfort when their daughter gets uncomfortable, right? So she's able to stay more regulated and tolerate it. So interestingly enough, the child is much more adaptive with this mom. And this is where I really got the insight that it's not better or worse. It's just that when you see a child behaving differently in different situations, it tells you that the situation or the relationship and the expectations are different, right? Often why kids go into school and the teachers report they're superstars, and at home parents are, call them terrors, literally. And I think there could be many reasons for that. But with many of my families, I have come to understand that often it's because, like with the teacher, they're just treating all the kids the same. The expectations are clear. There's like a child's upset, they're very empathetic and they move on, and the child is able to regroup more quickly. They're not adapting to the child all the time, they're tolerating their discomfort. So in this family, Lucy, that's the relationship she's developed. So if the child melts down when she can't have the extra ice cream or the extra, couple minutes of screen time, or her banana broken too, she's comfortable saying, I know, now you either have two bananas or no banana, but you decide, but we're not going to have another banana. And the child then it adapts more quickly because there's none of this trying to make it all better and being comfortable with her discomfort. Then you have the other mom, Chrissy, who shared that in her family of origin, there was a lot of shaming, a lot of discounting of her feelings, not really tuning in to who she was. She was not seen. There was a lot of feelings of rejection and emotional abandonment. So when her daughter gets triggered, it is huge for her. Feels so intolerable that she immediately jumps into making it all better.
Yep.
And so a relationship has evolved where, and they tell different stories about like being at the playground and her having a very similar upset about like someone not letting her on the slide, or she doesn't want to leave when it's time to leave, and with completely different reactions. And Chrissy will even say she will immediately look to her and expect her to come and intervene. And so it just makes the point that there are so many variables at play. So with Chrissy, with that understanding, I've been able to help her see that the gift to their child is being able to manage the trigger and provide the daughter what she needs, not necessarily what she wants.
Mhm.
And that is very different than emotional abandonment that she experienced, right? Like the association she's making is, if I'm not addressing and responding to every need and feeling, then I'm abandoning her and
Yeah.
I'm not accepting her for who she is.
Which makes perfect sense. Like, again, some of this stuff, when we just, it's a little bit of an onion, we unpeel it, we say, oh, I totally get why that's there. And it's not relevant in this situation. But kiddos are also learning, particularly highly sensitive, very empathic, very intuitive children are learning, oh, this is how I connect with my caregiver, right? So there's that over and above sort of any support that they need and any kind of limit setting or whatever, like mechanics of the situation. Underneath all of that is like, oh, I get close to my grown up when they're providing all of this for me, and when there's some kind of drama, like that's kind of layered throughout. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's such an important point because it's all about expectations, right? Like this is not good or bad, right or wrong. It's that like this this mom, Chrissy, will when the banana breaks say, "Oh no, it's okay, sweetie. I can put the banana back together," or here's another banana because it's so triggering to her to see her child's upset that the child now has just come to expect that when her banana breaks with Chrissy, with mama instead of mommy, then mama is going to make it all better. So she cries more, there's more whining, and because she's associated that with getting that need met. So but the what the major insight in this particular consult where all of this surfaced was like really being able to look at it from a 64,000 foot view and figure out what does this child really need from both of them. And how can you recalibrate this relationship to help her be her best self and have higher expectations for her, because that's a lot of what I see happening in these families is that when we do all the calming and all of the problem solving that we as ESPs naturally fall into, is that we end up enabling as opposed to supporting. And that's the line that often gets crossed. And there is a way to be connected and be that validating, loving parent while also having expectations, because when we don't have expectations for kids and we run in and say, oh my gosh, you can't handle this broken banana, the child internalizes, I'm not capable of managing an upset like this and I need mama to come in and fix it. And so now that process has started where Chrissy is now seeing that what it means to love and provide her daughter what she needs actually includes limits and expectations while also acknowledging that this is really hard and difficult.
And you can do both. I think this comes as news to parents sometimes, that you can be, and sometimes the reaction is just not allowing for that. Again, parents are triggered. They're just trying to like make it go away, please. But you can always, even for the vilest of behaviors, acknowledge the feeling from which those behaviors arise. You are so angry, and I will not let you break the furniture.
Mm-hmm.
Right? It can be both, but only only if we can stay in possession of our right minds to do so. And
Yeah,
I often tell parents who come to Raising Orchid Kids, like, the number one thing you got to know is you got to stay calm. If you can't stay calm, your number one thing is to figure out why you can't. So
yeah, and actually that's a really good point, is that when I'm working with families, really that's the work is is what is making it hard for you to do that? Because once we start talking, it becomes very apparent very quickly to the parent that the limit is important and loving in theory,
yeah.
but the trigger is so big that it becomes the obstacle. And that's what we have to focus on is, yes, I know that letting her watch 3 extra hours of screen time is not healthy, and that I'm letting her do it because it's the one thing that calms her and I want her to be calm. Like they know in 10 seconds that that's not healthy, but in the heat of the moment the trigger is so big that it makes it hard for them. So then we talk about what would help you be able to do that, right? And that's when we figure out, what do you need to do for you? What do you need to get comfortable with? A lot of it is mind shifting, right? That the meltdown in and of itself is not harmful to the child, right? That like if you stay what they need is for you to be their rock. So while they're melting down because you haven't let them watch another episode of Peppa Pig or whatever their poison might be,
Yeah.
is what they need from you is, I know that was a really tough moment and it's really hard when I put a limit and I don't expect you to like it, and then you just stay quiet and calm. which leads me to another really, really important point is, and I think maybe we talked about this last time, and I write a lot about this because I get a lot of video from my families because I really want to see what it feels like in the heat of the moment. And what I see over and over again from the most amazing parents is incredible efforts to get the child to calm,
Yeah.
and trying to talk, like reason with them or talk them out of it, or let's talk about these feelings. I know it's really hard. Tell me more about that. In the heat of the moment, that is only more stress for the child. And I
Yeah.
know you know this, and
Yep.
it's for, our listeners out there, just to remind them that often in these moments, less is more. One validating statement, and then your quiet presence, talking to them, trying to get them to talk about their feelings. They're not in a headspace where they're able to access any of that, and
And I,
it just usually leads to over arousal and things like stop telling me that, stop talking to me, and it's because they just need quiet. And it's after the storm, when you're lying in bed with them at night, where you could say, that was really tough. You were so angry that I wouldn't let you do A, B, C, or D, have wheat thins for dinner out of the pantry, like the millions of insane things kids want.
yeah. But
That
we also, we think that, I think sometimes we think that our strategy of staying calm isn't working. In other words, if staying calm were working, then my child would also be calm. And that is that's just not true because literally the only person's behavior we can control is our own. And then everybody else has to do what they got to do. But it sometimes feels like that, right? Like I'm trying this great parenting strategy, like it's not working. Like
yeah,
when you sit to meditate and you scrunch up your face and you're like, it's not working.
yeah. Well, it's a really important point, Gabrielle, because that is, of course, another misinterpretation of a lot of what parents see on Instagram, right? About sharing your calm. And it's critically important. But what parents don't understand or get is that sharing your calm doesn't mean your child's going to calm. Like sharing your calm is an end in and of itself. It's not a failure if your child doesn't calm. What it means is you're not adding to their distress. You're not amplifying it. You're showing them that you can contain it and that you can be their rock for them. That is the end goal of that, because exactly what you say, like there's no panacea. And so if you're expecting any of your strategies to always work, and if they don't, somehow it's a failure, and then you have to try 20 different things, that is a really important misunderstanding that is so important and freeing to parents, by the way, once you help them understand that in and of itself, it's just setting the limit and staying calm as your child weathers that storm. That's the gift, not that it results in some predetermined outcome that you have no control over.
Yeah. And in fact, just to like put a real fine point on it, when we are going, when we get to that choice point of like, I want a cup, and now we have a decision to make. Trying a bunch of different strategies, like kind of running through your list and then running back and then making another one up, like, okay, I'll bedtime is another one where we see this, right? Where it's like, I want another book. Okay, we'll add one more book. I want another book. Okay, we'll add 10 more books. It's never enough. It's never enough. But if we know already in advance, we the adults, that it's never going to be enough, then there's no problem.
Yeah.
Because of course it's not enough. And so we're having one. We're not going through a whole list of
Right.
menu items, layering stuff on top of stuff.
Right. And it, in this article, it's one of the most important points is managing expectations. And that's what you're speaking to, which is so important, that if your expectations are here and your child's ability is here, this delta is ripe with maddening frustration, right? So if you if you go into it knowing it's never going to be enough books, it's never going to be enough songs, it's never going to be enough cuddle time, then you can stay more regulated because you're not frustrated. Like, it's never, I've read you 5 books now. You're a bottomless pit. Yes, they are a bottomless pit, and there's nothing wrong with it. Children, that's in their DNA. They are, it's never going to be enough of screen time and treats and cuddle time with you, and that's okay. But it doesn't mean that they can't adapt to the fact that they can't have those things. And so I even go a step further, and I suggest to parents that they say that out loud, that they say, Sammy, I know it's never going to be enough books. We love reading books together. It's never going to feel like enough books. And our rule is 2 books. And I don't expect you to like this limit. I'm not asking you to like it. This is a mommy decision. And if you need to be upset about it, that's totally fine. You really have to say out loud, it's okay to be disappointed, because there's something very powerful in saying that out loud, because I find that it actually diffuses the protest, because often some of the protest is hoping that that's going to derail you from the limit. But when you're like, I'm okay with the protest,
Oh, yeah.
It limits the power of it.
Yes. And then you will get, depending on how long you've been doing this, I hate you, right? Child will now escalate. And so then you really got to be prepared. And listen,
Yeah.
to this original kind of ESP, emotional support parent, who is so tuned in and so empathetic to their child, and like, oh gosh, if they're saying I hate you, they must really be feeling a level of rage that's my fault. Like, that's a terrible place to be. And so, hopefully part of the reason they work with you is so that you can diffuse that in advance. Like, by the way,
right.
They will say words.
And you can, and again, like, I don't want to denigrate, like, being the emotional support parent is a major gift you give to your kid. It's the recalibration of what does love look like for them, right?
Yeah.
Because I had an ESP whose child said to her, when food was a big issue, and he actually was a decent eater, but he demanded, of course, macaroni and cheese and chicken nuggets or whatever it was every night. And if she didn't make it, he would say things like, so you only care about what you like. You don't care at all about me eating. And then he said to her one day, how does it feel to be a bad parent? He literally said to her, how does it feel to be a bad parent?
Oh my God.
Well, this was so triggering to her, because her entire life has been focused on making him feel like the most loved child and having this incredibly loving, connected relationship. And now things have gone completely off the rails. And so once we're able to look at that and see that that's not what she's angling for. So what's the obstacle to that? What is really happening under the surface? What is the narrative that is playing out in this child's brain? And how do we get her back to being that loving, connected parent she wants to be? And having him experience that doesn't mean that he's happy all the time. So, another one of my little mantras are, happy children are not always happy.
Yep.
And they are going to hurl unbelievable venom and vitriol that you can't believe comes out of 3, 4, 5, 6-year-olds' mouths. But it doesn't mean they don't love you.
Which is so hard, right? We're so used to, I don't know, particularly in 2023 in Washington, D.C., whatever. We're so used to words mattering, and they do matter. Of course they matter. But like, we assume that a 3-year-old knows the weight of their words, and they absolutely do not. Of course they don't. They're just trying things. They're throwing spaghetti at the wall to see what's going to get them their connection. They are trying always bids for connection, right? However they can get it. And if saying I hate you is going to get them that connection, they will do it because it works.
Yeah. Or the parent feels like, oh my God, no, buddy, I love you. I'll read another book.
Yep.
you know, or I'll let you stay up another hour, or
Yeah.
you could sleep in my bed if they really don't want them sleeping in their bed. And the child cleverly puts two and two together. They're not being manipulative. They're being strategic. What kid doesn't necessarily, I mean, there are some kids who don't want to sleep in their parents' bed, but a lot of them, given the choice, would. But if you're a family where you don't want that, you want that boundary, there's nothing wrong with it. But if the child has figured out a way to trigger you, to derail you from whatever limit you're setting that they don't like, they're just going to keep using that because it's resulting in a desired outcome for them. But that's when I go back to what your child wants isn't necessarily what they need. That's really sort of, I would say, where my work lies, is really collaborating with parents to figure out what that is, and not to take what they want at face value. And if you're not giving it to them, you're not lying with them for 2 hours at bedtime, even though they're saying things like, I miss you and I need more time with you. What good parent is going to say, feel comfortable saying, you know I love you too, but it's time to go to bed, until they get permission from people like us who could really help them see that it's the lack of limit that causes almost all the problems in the relationship, because then you end up feeling resentful, angry, having really negative feelings about your child because you don't have your own space and you don't have that time to refuel, and you feel like they're sucking the lifeblood out of you. That's not what creates a healthy parent-child relationship.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, there's so much more to unpack here, and I'm going to put a pin in it, regretfully. But
Always.
always, if people want to know more about you, where should they go?
My website, it's
Which
just
is
Lerner Child Development. And if you Google that, my Instagram is also Lerner Child Development. Those are really the two main ways. And to sign up for my free newsletter, because it comes out every 3 weeks, and it's sort of what my work in the trenches is like with families, very actionable, real life stuff.
perfect. Lernerchilddevelopment.com. You will find all the things. We will also link in the show notes to the ESP article that you wrote. So
Okay.
you'll be able to link to the website from there. Claire, as always, it's so fun to talk to you.
Yes,
Thank you for
you
coming.
too. It's never long enough. See you next time.
Sounds good.